Let's bring in our next potential juror.
E6 is present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. You're going to be referred to, as you just have been, as juror E6. And the purpose of this questioning is for the attorneys to have an opportunity to talk to you about the questionnaire that you filled out yesterday morning. Okay? Mr. De La Ronda, you may begin.
Please, the court. Good afternoon, ma'am. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be limited to certain questions regarding the questionnaire in terms of publicity. Okay. Let me just start at, you've indicated in your questionnaire that you gathered some information from TV and also the internet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the TV aspect of it first. Was it local or national news? Or both?
Local. It was probably local, and I don't watch on a regular basis, just here and there. But
And when you say local, was it about the time that this happened back in February of 2012, or was it recently?
mostly around when it happened.
Okay, right around the time that it happened last year?
Right, yes.
Okay. And then, did you do any follow-up in terms of following the case after that?
No, I mean, I would just, sometimes I'd see a headline here and there, but I haven't followed the case.
In terms of the proceedings that have occurred in court, did you make a point to follow it and try to, keep attention, keep focus on what was happening at all? Nothing?
No.
Okay. And then you mentioned you did online news articles. Is that just by virtue of just did the Orlando Sentinel or other stuff? Or?
I have Orlando Sentinel web app or news app, and then
Sure.
Eyewitness 9, I think it is. So whenever I just see headlines, and that's about it.
Would that just be as you're going through the internet doing other stuff, you would just kind of glance at it, or would you
Right.
actually read it in depth of all the stories?
No, I would just see headlines. I mean, it seemed like there'd be a little headline almost every day. So yeah, usually I would just pass it by.
Okay. As best you can recall, is what you've got here in terms of the facts that you can recall, based on the case, what you've written down? What you remember on TV or on the internet, what you recall reading or seeing on TV? Have you noted everything you can remember at this time about the...
No, I just kind of
Summarized it?
But
Okay.
yeah, I remember more details than I put on there.
And I gather you realize that the media, or I view the opinion that the media always gets everything right, or they're not sure, or what?
Oh, no, they're not.
Okay, so you agree that what's important is the evidence that actually comes out in the courtroom?
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, whatever facts you obtain from the media, either from TV or online, you would agree that you have to leave that outside the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you agree? Is there any doubt in your mind that you could put that outside?
Well, no, I mean, any news I read, there's always a chance it's not right. You always read it with a grain of salt, I guess.
Okay. You also, I'm assuming, did you have any conversations with anybody after you read it online or you saw it on TV? Did you have conversations with any people about the case?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. You didn't talk to anybody and get their opinions or that kind of stuff? There was no
No.
Okay. And so you summarize it in terms of you knew the details of the case as you mentioned Trayvon, a teen, and you mentioned about approximately his age, was killed by George Zimmerman, right? And you remember reading about that or watching that on TV, is that correct?
Right,
Okay. And that George Zimmerman was in a neighborhood watch of some aspect of it?
right.
Okay. And that George Zimmerman claimed at some point killed him in self-defense?
Yes.
Okay, and is that kind of the summary of what conclusions you came to as a result of reading and watching it on TV? Not that you made your mind in terms of an opinion, what I'm saying is that what you recall in terms of summarizing what the facts were that you got?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I know there's more details, but yeah, it does
Sure.
seem like pretty solid facts.
Do you recall whether you would have heard any kind of, let me restate the question. Do you recall seeing any pictures at all about the case, any aspect of the case?
No, I've seen Mr. Zimmerman's picture, photo, just his face. I don't recall seeing any other.
Did you form any impressions as a result of seeing his face at all?
No.
Okay. And did you see any pictures of Trayvon Martin at all that you can recall?
I can't recall. I mean, I remember reading that he wore a hoodie, but I can't remember if I ever saw a picture of that or not. So I don't know if that's what I read or something I saw.
Sure. Okay. And I gather as you're absorbing all this stuff, you're not coming to conclusions one way or the other about the case? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, at some point you also realize that you got a summons, you may be a potential juror at some point, right? 3 weeks ago or a month ago?
Yes.
Is that correct? Did it come to mind that you possibly could be a juror in this case?
Well, this past weekend it occurred to me.
Okay, all right. Did you do any research as a result of that? Let me get caught up on the facts at all, or?
No.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of that? Oh, let me solidify my opinion one way or the other. You did not?
No.
Okay. And you understand that under the law, as you noted here by your answers, that the law really requires a person to keep an open mind and disregard really anything that they've seen on TV or read in the newspaper. Is there any doubt in your mind that you can do that?
No, there's no doubt in my mind.
Okay. And you did not do your own research on the case at all, is that correct, at any time?
At any time? No.
Okay.
I mean, I've read an article.
Sure,
too.
sure. I'm saying, other than reading it, did you go to any particular, or did you go to any websites about the case at all?
No,
Either,
just.
pro George Zimmerman or pro Trayvon
no,
Martin in the
no,
case?
no.
Okay. All right. In the news that you watched on TV or the articles that you may have read online, you understand that sometimes the news, when they put the news, there's also commentary, by lawyers or other people. Do you recall any aspect of that at all?
Commentary. No, not, I mean, vaguely maybe. I can't remember anything in particular.
Sure. Do you remember whether the commentary was made by lawyers or other legal experts, or was it anybody involved in the case, meaning lawyers involved in the case?
No.
Okay. Let's assume you're picked as a juror. You're sitting there. You listen to the evidence. You start hearing the evidence and you go, oh, God, I remember something different on TV, or I remember one of the lawyers either involved in the case or just a lawyer commenting from, somewhere up in Atlanta or something about the case. And that person said this and this, but it's different than what you hear from the witness stand. Can you take that out of your mind when you remember watching on TV or seeing it in the newspaper?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, you realize the law requires you to set that aside.
Yes.
Can you do that? Okay. And I gather everything else, in terms of you have no concerns about the conflicts or anything like that, is that correct? I think you noted here there's no issue about being able to sit as a juror, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
As I may have asked you this already, but in case I didn't, did I ask you whether your friends had expressed any opinions about the case at all?
No, I haven't really discussed it with anyone.
You haven't discussed it with any friends or anything? Or?
No.
relatives?
I mean, maybe at one point I might have said something to my kids about it, but no, I've not discussed.
How old are your kids?
11 and 13.
Okay. And when you talked about it, just saying like there's something in the news, or do you recall what you would have told your kids?
Just behavior that is safe, and that not that you're doing anything wrong, but just to be proactive and to stay safe. You know, it's just generally better to, you know, if you don't have to, don't walk around at night. I mean, they're young for that,
Sure.
but just kind of, just, I guess, making it a teaching moment.
Okay. But there was no aspect other than this was recently in the news, and just make sure that you're careful out there.
Yeah, and I don't even think I talked about it in specifics, just, you know, this kind of thing can happen, and there was recently this happened, and,
Oh, okay.
you know, you don't want to be mistaken for, you know, because, what am I trying to say? Just not to have the appearance of, that would invite trouble.
Okay, all right, okay. So it wasn't you giving your opinion about the case, it was more like a teaching moment to your kids, like
Right,
when you're out there, you know, something can happen.
right,
Like you would any case, like, you know, something happens in Arizona or anywhere, is that correct?
right, yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Yes, ma'am.
Afternoon. My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys on behalf of George Zimmerman, who is seated here, and Mark O'Mara. I guess we introduced ourselves yesterday morning. That was the group that you're in?
Yes.
Thank you. Just summarizing what I think I heard you say a few minutes ago and what's on the questionnaire is that you knew about this case shortly after it happened and it started to get media attention.
Correct.
Is that when you knew who the people involved were?
Right, when they started reporting it, after it happened.
Right, so that's when you knew the name Trayvon Martin
Yes,
and you knew the name George Zimmerman?
yes.
And did you see the pictures that the media released or that were released into the media back in, say, March or April of 2012?
I can't recall them. I don't recall what they were of it.
Not-
I saw them.
Okay, no, I'm not asking if you can actually remember them as much as did you follow the news then, and that would have included pictures that had been made available?
I was working full-time last year at that time, and I mean, I don't think, I don't remember any pictures. Because I think I just heard the news as it was coming out, but I didn't spend a lot of time watching TV or looking
Oh, sure,
into the...
sure. And we're not in any way suggesting that there's a right or a wrong answer to these questions. The purpose today is just to get a sense of what the prospective jurors have come in contact with through the media before the case started.
Okay,
So
well...
you may have clear memories of some things, you may have very vague memories of others, and maybe none whatsoever of others.
It's pretty vague. I mean, I know when it first happened, there was a lot of news about it, and so it just, you know, on the radio, you would hear things. On the news, if I happened to catch it, I saw it, but it's pretty vague. I was working full-time, and I was busy at that time. But now I'm not working, and so I kind of scroll through the headlines and stuff a lot more than I did a year ago.
Okay, when about in time did you leave your job or quit working?
It was around the middle to the end of September. of last year.
last fall.
Mhm.
So up until that point, your exposure to the news was less just by virtue of working all day.
Right,
Is that fair to say?
right. And then coming home and kids and
You-
very busy.
Sure. And you might, grab a headline or two, but you weren't paying particular attention?
Right.
Did that change in the fall where you began to follow news in general more carefully and this case as well?
No, I think maybe the beginning of this year, I've probably had more time to follow news, but still, I'm not one to just sit in front of the TV. So.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I do have more time, free time, at the beginning of this year.
At any point in time, was this case in particular something that you purposefully followed?
No.
Did you get the news about this case about the same way you would get the news about any other case or news story?
Mhm.
Let me just kind of run through a few things here. Did you attend any events that may have been connected with this case, any public events, demonstrations, or protests?
No.
Ever sign a petition or make your support of one party or the other known?
No.
I take it you've never seen any of the actual hearings that have been held in this case that may have been broadcast?
No.
Your local news outlet, the one you watch the most, is that a cable station or a local channel?
We have satellite TV, and I'm pretty sure we only get local channels.
If you care for some water, we have some of that available.
Okay.
Would you?
Sure.
Mayor Cruz?
Vending machine is out.
Sure. That would be very nerve-wracking. Okay, we're talking about the news outlet satellite. Does that include the local cable station 13? That
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
was that the primary source of your local news through channel 13?
No, I don't have a particular channel. It's kind of whatever is on.
Have you been aware of any of the decisions that have been made in the case? And by decisions, I mean things that the judge has decided as to how the case may go forward or something relating to any of the evidence.
I'm sure I've read or heard some of the decisions. I don't know. I know, I just remember there's headlines saying something, a motion was filed and the judge denied something. I don't recall specifics.
Is there anything about the decisions, or in fact, if you were going to pick something about the case itself, just the kind of exposure that you've had, the impressions that you've formed over the last year or so, is there anything in particular that stands out?
No, it just, what most stands out in my mind is that it was just very unfortunate. A very unfortunate incident.
In your, in the questionnaire where you mentioned just an overview of the basic facts of the case that you do understand, you mentioned that you know that Mr. Zimmerman was a neighborhood watch person.
Of some sort, yes.
Do you have any more information about that? Did it impress you one way or another that he may have had that position?
No, I've never known a neighborhood watch person, so I didn't really form an opinion. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I've never really experienced that.
Is that in and of itself something that you believe is a good thing or a bad thing, or have any opinion?
Never thought about it. I guess it could be a good thing or a bad thing.
In this case, have you formed an opinion whether
No.
or not that's important in the case?
No, I mean, I really don't even have, I don't know enough of the facts to form an opinion.
You indicate that Mr. Zimmerman has said the shooting was in self-defense.
Right.
Is there any information that you have from the newspaper or television that makes you think it wasn't?
No. I guess that's kind of why I really haven't paid much attention to the case, because I don't believe there was an eyewitness, so it's kind of, there were just two people that night, and I really can't make a guess without knowing the facts.
Well, of course, and any decision by the jury would be after all of the evidence is taken, and you've been
Right.
instructed on the law, you've heard arguments of counsel and such.
Right.
But what we're trying to do here today, and perhaps for several more days to come, is to get an idea what the prospective jurors bring in the courtroom with them because of the publicity of the case. So that's really the focus of my question, not how you might decide later, but whether or not at this point the information that you have makes you think in any way that, hey, he may be saying it's self-defense, but I heard this, or I think this, and maybe that's not really true.
Well, no, that's what I mean, is I never spent the energy to even try to come up with an opinion, because I don't know the facts. So I just never really felt like investing the energy to even form an opinion. I in no way ever foresaw that I would be sitting here, so
Sure.
there was just no need for me to, I had stuff going on in my life. So I haven't thought much about it one way or the other.
Has the case ever been a subject of conversation with you and your social friends or relatives where you might have said, for example, hey, you see this in the paper today, it's about the Zimmerman case?
No.
Anybody ever mentioned to you that they'd noticed something about this case and asked what you thought?
No.
I know from what you said, you have regular, the newspaper is available to you regularly, and of course the news as well. Could you estimate how many times you may have read, if we're going to just add it all up, how many different exposures perhaps to the case from either the media or conversations, maybe at work when this first happened, or any way to estimate how many times this has sort of come across your mind?
Okay. So counting, like, if I saw a headline and didn't read the article?
Just something that made you think about it, yes.
Oh. 200, I guess. I mean, it's kind of, anytime the news is on, they'll say one little bit, not without making a big story out of it, but just having it brought into my mind, yeah, at least once every few days.
Have you Have you heard any of the attorneys connected with the case speaking in the media or interviewed?
No, I don't believe so. Possibly, maybe making one statement, but it's vague and I can't remember if it happened or not.
Anything that an attorney on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman, or perhaps on behalf of the state, or perhaps on behalf of the Martin family that sticks out in your mind?
No.
You had mentioned, please, you had mentioned that you did see a picture of George Zimmerman's face. Have you seen any pictures of his face following the event with injuries?
Oh, no.
Never seen any of the pictures that may show any injuries?
No, it's always just the one basic, just his chest up, and it's kind of just with, it's the same picture I think they always flash.
The one that just kind of shows up next to the news article?
That's the only one I remember seeing.
Have you heard any of the recordings in the case?
Yes.
There are two main recordings I'm referring to. One is a 911 call, and the other is a call Mr. Zimmerman made to the police. Do you know if you've heard either or both of those?
I think I heard both of those.
The 911 call, do you remember anything about that call in particular, or why it was in the news?
Well, I think I don't remember when that came out, but I just remember thinking it was really difficult for me to hear anything or know who was talking.
Have you heard any of the calls that may contain a yell or a scream of some sort?
I think that was the...
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, I think.
And the other call I'm talking about is the one that Mr. Zimmerman made that was recorded at sort of the beginning of this case.
Okay. I believe I have heard it.
Have either of those calls caused you to form an opinion about Mr. Zimmerman's responsibility, guilt, or made you in any way think that you have an opinion about whether he's guilty or innocent?
No. I guess that particular call was a little more thought-provoking, but it didn't cause me to form a hard opinion about it.
The call with to the 911 operator with the screams?
Mm-hmm.
Have you formed any opinion based upon listening to it, other information in the media about it perhaps, as to whose voice it is screaming?
No, I don't know.
Are you aware of any court proceedings ongoing in connection with that?
Yeah, I do recall reading that there were some audio experts in court.
What's your sense of that then? And what I mean is, what do you know about that, and what do you...
That's all I know. That was kind of maybe a headline, so I don't know anything more than that.
Have you followed that aspect of the case closely enough to have your own opinion about those experts?
No.
Are you generally aware of who the experts are, or what their positions on that issue might be?
No. I think there was maybe a headline just saying that there were audio experts in court, but no, beyond that.
Do you know what the experts were being asked to testify about?
No, I mean, I can imagine that they were giving their opinions on the calls and the recordings, but that's just what I would guess. I don't know anything.
Do you know what aspect of the recording they were asked to give their opinion regarding? I may not have said that very well, but do you know what I'm getting at, do you think?
I didn't read anything, but I can guess what they were maybe trying to testify about, but no, I don't know.
Mhm. Do you know the status of that issue, meaning where that issue stands in the case overall?
No, I mean, the last thing that I read, and I don't even think I read the article, but I think it said there was no conclusion. There was no, they never, there was no determination made, or something to that effect.
Okay. Is that basically a summary of what you know about that particular aspect of the case?
Yeah, I think I just saw a headline last week or something, and that was it. I mean, I really just kind of skimmed through and...
Do you know, as a result of that, what the judge is being asked to do in connection with that evidence?
No.
Do you know whether or not the jury will actually hear that evidence?
I don't.
So let's look at it this way. If the jury were presented with evidence that was different or otherwise different than what you thought the evidence might be in the case overall, would you be able to limit your consideration of the case to just the evidence that was presented basically within these four walls?
Yes.
The question would be like this, here's the evidence, you're on the jury, here's the evidence, that you don't go back and you say, you know what, I know that, but I remember an article, I remember a newscast, or I remember something that was different or more or less, and I'd like to tell everybody about it. Do you understand that wouldn't be appropriate? Okay, so for you though, would you be able to limit for your consideration the evidence that's presented here if you were on the jury?
Yes, I really don't put much stock into what comes across in the news because it's so speculative and so, no, I mean, I really haven't paid attention and yes, I would separate that.
I don't know what kind of work that you did before while you were employed. What did you do?
I worked in financial services.
Did you supervise people?
No.
Were you asked to resolve disputes?
No.
And what I'm getting at is whether in your professional life, if you've ever had to deal with issues limited to the facts at hand and disregard other information that either wasn't relevant or that you weren't allowed to consider.
I mean, I guess at some point in life I've made a decision with the facts I had at hand, not knowing future details or unknown details, but no, not professionally.
That's fine. Just like I said, I'm just trying to understand what your life experience has been that could possibly come into play. As to the lesson, the learning lesson, I think you said with your children, do I understand that you never talked with your children about the specifics of the case? Or did you talk with them about the scenario overall?
It was kind of like, yeah, it was a scenario, and I don't remember how specific. because I generally try to, when I talk with them, to talk in generalities. But it was just, the gist of it was, to just make sure that, you're not doing anything wrong, but just make sure you don't have the appearance where someone else might just get a false impression, and don't put yourself in harm's way. And I think I told them that there was a teenager and he was killed, and just trying to get them to think about what they do or what appearance they might be giving by their actions.
To draw some lesson out of what you knew of the case.
Right.
Did they happen to know about the case from school or anything?
No.
I know your contact with family or friends and discussions about the case has been very limited, but have in any of those conversations anyone expressed their opinion to you, whether George Zimmerman is guilty or not?
No.
Friends, neighbors,
Not
former
that I can
coworkers?
recall, no.
May I have just a moment? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'll please remain seated for just a moment. When council's ready, please approach the bench. Potential juror.
Your Honor, this is B as in Echo 40.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, and from here on out, you're going to be referred to as Juror E40. And the purpose of the questioning today is to go over the juror questionnaire that you filled out Monday. Okay, Mr. De La Ronda is going to start. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Hello. From reading your questionnaire here, you basically were living in Iowa at the time that this happened back in February of last year. Did I have that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long have you been living here in Seminole County? How long after, when did you move to Seminole County is what I'm trying to ask you.
I moved to Seminole County in November of last year.
And you mentioned in your questionnaire that you have heard about the case and based on national news?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall, was it like NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, CNN, or?
Probably NBC.
Okay. And would it have been a very just basic, something happened in Sanford, or what do you recall at the time you first heard it, what you heard about the case?
I don't recall. I just recall that we were told that, that an incident was reported in Florida. That's what I remember. It was not
No specific
major,
about facts or anything
no,
like that?
No.
And since you were living in Iowa at the time,
Yeah.
did you pay attention to the case at all after that?
No.
Okay. So You moved down here, you said, I think in November?
Yes.
Okay. Once you moved here in November, did you start paying attention to the case at all?
There have been reports on TV, but I didn't go out of my way to seek additional information.
Okay. And when you say reports on TV, would that have been on local TV or would that still have been national news?
Local.
Okay, all right. Do you recall local TV, what particular channel you watched?
2, I believe.
Okay. I think we've covered the aspect of the TV aspect of it. Did you do any media search, or let me rephrase the question. Do you on a regular basis get on the internet, on Facebook or other aspects of our social media that we have?
I don't have a Facebook account,
Okay.
no.
Do you do any research on Google, or just you get your news by the internet is what I'm trying to ask you?
Very little.
Okay.
Very little.
Do you recall anything in particular on the internet that you may have stumbled upon regarding this case?
No.
Okay. Do you get the newspaper since you've moved here to Seminole County?
I get the Sunday newspaper.
Okay, and that would be the Orlando Sentinel?
In there, yes.
Okay. Do you recall reading about this case in any Sunday newspaper?
I believe there was some articles in the last 2 or last Sunday.
Last Sunday specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what, if anything, do you recall reading about the case last Sunday?
I remember there was a lot of information about logistics.
Okay.
How many tickets would be released and where people should park and
That.
media information.
Anything about the facts of the case?
No.
Okay. All right, at some point, you got the jury summons to come here,
Yes.
correct? After receiving that, did you pay more attention to the news? Because I believe you got that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the summons, or?
At least 3 or 4 weeks
Okay, all
ago,
right.
yes.
Did you start paying closer attention, knowing that you potentially could be a juror in at least one case here in Seminole County?
I believe it was on the news. There was a reporter that said if your summons said June 10th, it's likely.
Okay.
And that was really the only connection I made.
Okay. As a result of that, did you then do any research about the case itself?
No.
Okay. And was that on purpose, or you just weren't interested in it?
I'm just too busy at work. I just
Okay.
didn't have time.
Okay. And so all you really remember is it was an incident involving the persons mentioned, Mr. Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, and one of the individuals is deceased. I think
Yes.
is what you wrote.
Right.
Is that all you really remember about the case?
I remember something about in Florida, remember a gated community stated, and I knew somebody was a teenager.
Okay. Anything else?
That's about it.
Okay. You know, as we go through life, sometimes we remember things later that we didn't remember at the time as of yesterday or today, and, you know, they pop in our minds. And so
Sure.
the question is, you're a juror, you're listening to the evidence, you're hearing certain evidence, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, well, hold on, I do remember watching the news or reading something in the paper, and it may have been a little bit different the way the media reported it. The question is, if that were to occur, do you think you can set that aside? Do you understand the law requires you to set aside and only rely in making your decision on your, obviously, your God-given common sense, but also the facts that come out in the courtroom? Do you
Yes.
think you can do that?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't have any question about if something popped out the case just from the media?
No.
Okay. Do you always believe what's in the media in
No.
terms of what they tell?
No, I do not.
Okay. And you're not the first person to say that, so don't feel bad. And what, you just have you understand that they have, do you feel they have opinions when they write the articles, or you don't think they get everything, or what's your basis for not?
I would say a combination of all of the above, the information they may have at the time, what they place importance on, the way they might report something, or just their take on what the different types of people they may have interviewed as
Sure.
opposed to others.
So you're not getting a complete story, I guess, for lack of a better word. It may not be accurate.
Probably would be accurate, yes.
Okay. And I apologize if I already asked you this. Once you found out you were coming down here and you knew it potentially was about this case, did you do any research since last Sunday, I guess?
I did not.
You didn't have much time, but...
I did not.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind now, since you wrote this Monday morning, and I know you followed the judge's admonitions not to talk to anybody either at home or obviously since you've been waiting here in the courthouse, but I'm talking about maybe you've had a little bit more time to think about it. Was there anything else you can remember that you said, oh, I wish I wouldn't have written down, I do remember this other aspect of it?
No.
Okay. How about with families? Have you had any discussions about the case prior to coming to court when the court, Judge Nelson told you you can't talk about the case? What I'm getting is the time you got the summons, the time you came to court, did you have any discussions with family or friends about like, oh, I potentially might be a juror, in the Zimmerman case or anything like that?
Not really. No, I remember saying I'm summoned to jury on June 10th. There are maybe several cases going on in Florida. I don't know. I've never been summoned here before. I don't know the protocol or procedures, so I didn't really draw conclusions.
As far as you can remember, nobody gave you their opinions about the case, and family or friends, or did they?
They did not.
No. How about back in Iowa when you first heard about it? I'm going back now. Back in 2012, February 2012, when you first heard about the case, did anybody there, family or friends, give you, or co-workers, et cetera, give you their opinions about the case?
No.
So I gather you had no first impressions and you have no lasting impressions about the case, and that's why you were able to put that you have no opinion and you can keep an open mind. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Meara, sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. The afternoon wears on. We tend to slow down a little bit, so I'm going to try and talk it up and talk a little bit louder. No, you're fine. You can relax. I'm just trying to keep myself going. The main reason why this part of it happens is to make sure that whatever you heard about the case, you leave outside the doors when you come in. So if you said yes to that question, we could stop right now and answer it. The problem, as Mr. Del Rianta mentioned, is we want to drill in a little bit just to make sure that what you may have heard doesn't show back up later, and then you have to deal with it. And it's easy to deal with it, but I want to talk to you about that.
Sure.
If you do remember something that we haven't talked about here today, the judge is going to tell you, going to instruct you that the way we handle criminal cases, all cases, is that you have to listen to what the witnesses have to say, look at the evidence, and decide only and solely on that evidence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The judge were to tell you to do that, would you be able to agree and accomplish that?
Yes.
Okay. Corollary to that is, of course, if you hear anything outside, whether you happen to look down and see a newspaper on the floor as a juror and see a headline, you have to convince yourself to ignore that. And if you saw a headline a month ago, you have to make sure that it doesn't creep back into your process. Can you commit to that as well?
I could.
Sometimes other jurors will do the same things that we're worried about, that you get picked, you're on the jury, you're now back deliberating, the case is over. State's put on their case, we've heard jury instructions from the court, and now it's your turn to decide on a verdict. And some other juror says, I never heard about this fact. And I remember reading about it. I remember my aunt told me about it, or whatever. How would you handle that juror who tried to bring in something that wasn't talked about from the jury, from the witness box?
I think you need to steer that person to remember that they need to pay attention to the information that was delivered in the setting of the courtroom, and perhaps ask for transcripts if that's a possibility, sort of bring people back to what the information was that was delivered in the setting in which you need to make your decisions based on.
And you can take that on as a juror to make sure that not only yourself, but all the other jurors individually, and the jury as a whole, applies the law as the judge suggests, or the judge orders, instructs you to do.
Sure, absolutely.
You had mentioned a moment ago as one of the reasons why you didn't run out and look at more information about this case was that you were too busy at work.
Yes.
Was your job that brought you down here from Iowa?
I took a position here, and that's
Okay.
why I moved.
Okay, sounds good. So it's a new position here,
Yes.
6 or 7 months old, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
6 months.
There is a chance, as you may have read in the jury questionnaire, that this case could last 4 to 6 weeks. That fact alone, would that cause you problems? Obviously, it's problematic to leave a job for 4 or 6 weeks, but would that cause you any specific problems that we would need to discuss amongst us and the court if you were asked to serve as a juror in this case?
I don't believe so.
There's also a chance, though it's not been decided yet, that because of some of exactly what we're talking to you about here, the publicity of the case, that the jury may be sequestered. And what that means is that you don't go home at night to try and save inviolate everything that you hear. Because obviously, if you promise to listen to just what's here in the courtroom, we send you home and you get blared on by the media, that impact could really have a negative impact on the case. So the judge may decide that you'll spend time with us not only during the day but at night. Would that in and of itself then cause a problem that you could not get around?
No.
Okay, so you could serve for 6 weeks if it takes that long, and even if you were sequestered.
Yes.
Have you gotten a feel for the local media here yet in the 7 or 8 months you've been here?
Not really. I don't watch much news.
Okay. And do you have cable?
I do.
What is
Dish
it?
network?
Satellite?
Satellite, yes.
Okay, so you get the national stations if you want,
Yes,
and you also, I think, have access to the locals as well.
yes.
Any particular ones that you do watch? I think you said Channel 2 is
Channel 2,
becoming your default?
yes.
Okay. If I were to throw out some of the names of the major stations like CNN and Fox and ABC, NBC, CBS, out of those 5, which one would you default to?
NBC.
And why is that?
I'm just accustomed to it.
Okay,
I enjoyed watching Peter Jennings. That was his news, so I stay with that station.
okay. There are some stations that are known for being of a certain political bent. Do you consider yourself likening one of or any of those stations because there's a certain political view or slant on the news?
No.
And if I were to ask you, based upon your limited exposure to the case, the one most significant fact that you remember, just one thing that sort of distills out your perspective on this case in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, what would it be?
I recall the phrase gated community. I recall the phrase teenager. And that's about it. And some struggle. That's about what I remember.
Anything else?
No.
And you said, should something else come up, you'll make sure that you don't let it come into your process. Should be chosen as a juror, and also you would not allow other jurors to do it, correct?
Correct.
Then I have no further questions. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll just remain seated for a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, please approach the bench.
E54.
Okay, please be seated. Good afternoon. From here on out, you're going to be referred to as juror E54. And right now, we're going to have the attorneys ask you some questions regarding the juror questionnaire that you filled out Monday morning. Mr. De La Ronda will begin.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. I'm going to refer to you as 54, sir. We've had an opportunity to look at your questionnaire that you filled out, and so I'm going to be asking you some questions as a result of that in terms of publicity you were exposed to and your opinions about that. I believe you stated that you wrote down maybe 6 or 7 lines about the facts you remember, and you wrote that, I believe, yesterday morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've had a little bit more time maybe to think about it. I know you've followed the judge's admonitions not to talk to anybody about the case, but what I want to know is there anything else that comes to mind other than what you've written down here now about that you've had some
Yes.
time to think about it?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what else you remember about the case?
Well, as I was thinking back, I know that there was, I know that there was Mr. Zimmerman made a phone call when he first noticed young Trayvon Martin. To, I believe, I don't know if it was just the police, I think, just a non-emergency police number, I think it was.
Okay.
Was talking to the dispatcher there about a suspicious, what he thought was a suspicious character, suspicious individual. And there was some conversation, I don't remember the whole conversation that took place with that.
Anything else that you can remember?
Well, then I believe that there was also a 911 call that closer near the end of the incident that took place. And again, I don't know all the particulars.
Sure.
About that.
Anything else you can remember?
That's pretty much all right now.
And so I think about, if I'm reading your writing correctly, I take my glasses off to read it. George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin in Sanford over a year ago. Trayvon Martin died at the scene or at the site. And then you've got here, Mr. Zimmerman originally was not charged for any crime by the Sanford Police Department, but after public protests and an investigation by the state attorney's office was later charged with second-degree murder.
That's right.
Okay, is that
That's the way I remember.
accurate? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you read it right, yeah.
Okay, and then you also stated, I'm sorry, but the state attorney's office was later charged with second-degree